I wouldn't consider him necessarily a serial killer only because, I mean, if you're talking about the strict way of categorizing people, you know, the scholastic way of he would be considered mass murder because it all happened
right
in one day. But I mean, we only, I mean, who knows how many people he's killed? I mean, he was suspected of killing the one in Dallas, I believe. Was it in Dallas?
Yeah.
Which city it was in. He was suspected of killing one. It just so happened that where the body was found was some, you know, something, a shed or something that he had built, and he had been drinking in the same tavern that she had been drinking in. So to me, that's enough coincidence to say, yeah, if you're drinking in the same pet tavern as Richard Speck, and then you end up in a shed that he built, I'm just going to go out on a limb here and say that, you know, that's how you died. But so in that case, if that was the case, she was a woman. So I guess you could kind of call him a serial killer. But he seemed to have it was kind of hit or miss with him, though. I don't know if he necessarily had. See, I like to think of a serial killer as someone who has the overwhelming urge to kill, kind of like, you know, when you're talking about Kemper. You know, there's someone who killed one person at a time. Usually, I think all his victims were one at a time, and there was a pattern to it. You know, with Speck, I mean, he may have killed people in the past, but something happened. Something snapped in him that one night with the nurses. So I know he had anger issues. He was an alcoholic. He was a drug user. So who knows? I mean, it just may have been something that came together in a perfect storm that night when he showed up at the nurses.
Well, I got a question, Ray. If we're talking that he's not, maybe he's not a serial killer, maybe he's a mass murderer, would he be considered by that time and that time standard a spree killer because he kind of went on a spree and killed all 8 of them at once?
It could have definitely been a spree killer. Sure, you could. I would categorize him as a spree killer.
Yeah.
Kind of like, I mean, on par with like, yeah, I would, you know, I mean, well, you're either killing sprees or you're killing sweethearts or you're killing or nerds, but M&Ms, you know. But yeah, kind of like the Las Vegas shooter, he would be a spree killer, you know, but also a mass murder. I mean, obviously you're killing people en masse, so, but it's kind of a spree. It's like a one-time thing. But then a mass murderer could also be a one-time thing. So I don't know. There's some overlap there. But again, I wouldn't necessarily, unless I mean, who knows? He may be a serial killer, like I said, but we just don't know. You know, I mean, how many places did he live? He was on a boat at one point. You know, we don't know every stop off that he made. So there may be other victims out there. But right now, I would like, yeah, I like spree killer. I'll go with spree killer.
You know, he was weird in prison, but he did a lot of weird crap.
He was just he is a messed up individual. That's my official. He is 10 different types of screwed up. That's my official psychological evaluation. But I mean, he's screwed up like 2 rocks and 3 piles.
I mean, this is a guy who exposed himself to his boss on one of the ships that he was working on. Can you? I mean, there's a lot of things that I would say to a boss or whatever if I didn't care about working there, but I can't imagine that would be one of the things I would do. And that's the thing about Speck is he just would do things that just did not, I don't know, match normal human patterns.
Right. One thing you don't hear with him, which is kind of unusual, is that you know, I mean, maybe there wasn't a whole lot about his childhood other than when they talk about like how his second father was kind of abusive and how he, you know, had hit his head a number of times. You know, the psychologist in prison had asked him that question, have you ever hit your head? One of those generic kind of entry-level psychiatric questions that they asked the prisoners. And he went off on a thing like, oh, yeah, constantly. You know, like he'd been knocked unconscious for like 2 hours at a time, at least 3 times when he was a kid, and went on this whole thing. You know, so that could have something to do with it. But there was no mention of like, you know, with a lot of serial killers and stuff like that, you hear about bedwetting or setting fires or torturing animals or, you know, we know what he, you know, did in prison, you know, based on the book and also the show Mindhunters, you know, when he tossed the bird into the fan. So obviously he had, he was definitely sociopathic. He didn't really have much of a conscience. But he was also prone to like fits of anger. Like he could be perfectly kind and gentle 1 minute and then flip on you the next minute. And obviously, I mean, that it's kind of like the statement he made, and it was. I mean, I love the show Mindhunters because it followed the book pretty well, but he said is that they were just, it was their time, or I forget exactly what he said.
It just wasn't their night.
It wasn't their night. Yeah, exactly. Just wasn't their night, which is kind of true in a way, but definitely a sociopathic statement. So.
Oh yeah, and weird thing. I didn't realize that, and this is again, a long time. Okay, so the 8 murders that we know of took place July 14th, 1966. So we've got a little anniversary here. But when we're talking this long ago, I had no idea people in Illinois had like a Texas drawl. And he did. Like whenever I heard him talk, I was like, wow, that was
he had a
what
drawl.
they did.
He had a drawl. I mean, it's kind of funny that people in Illinois, if you're south of I-80, you have an accent. I mean, it's kind of like, if you go any further south, like I said, than I-80, which isn't that far away from here, people start, you have kind of a drawl. Of course, he lived in Texas for a while, so he may have picked up more of an accent there, but he definitely had a drawl, to his voice. And people, central, south Illinois do. So, which I was kind of shocked by when I was driving through to Missouri. I'm like, where'd all these Southerners come from? And it's like, it's your state, buddy. You're just too used to Chicago.
Yeah, Chicago is Illinois is kind of a mishmash of different areas, all in one state. Kind of like California is.
Yeah, I guess. The only time I was in California was when I was in the military, and it wasn't very fun. So I was in Death Valley, so that's about the only part of California I've ever seen.
Well, let's get into the date in question here. The one that everybody kind of associates with Speck for good reason. Obviously, it was July 14th, 1966. Mm-hmm. He had all these criminal charges along the way. Before this point, did you feel like he was, I don't know, institutionalized in any way, shape, or form? I know he hadn't been there for years and years, but he had been in and out of jail. Manson spent a good portion of time in jail before you could kind of say that. But what about Speck? Did he just crave that type of situation, or what was his deal?
I don't. It's hard to say. With Speck, it's like, I think he was just a powder keg, in my opinion. I think he just had a lot of issues that alcohol and the drug use obviously didn't help, but he had kind of a predisposition to the anger outbursts based on, it could have something to do with, brain damage when he was a kid. If you were knocked unconscious for, an hour and a half or 2 hours at a time, 3 or 4 times as a kid, and then you're involved in all these bar fights, and you get, clocked, 100 times in bar fights, and it's kind of like almost the same type of thing that, the NFL players, where you have that sort of damage that occurs over time, coupled with the alcoholic, the alcoholism, the drug abuse, and obviously some sociopathic tendencies. You've kind of got a perfect storm, and you have these fits of rage, and I think it was probably a very honest statement when he said it wasn't their night. It was just, he it was shortly before he killed them, he had the problem with not being able to find a job, and, his brother-in-law drove him to the maritime, the maritime, what do they call it? It was kind of like a labor thing for seamen, and he was trying to get a seaman's card and was signing up for work, and they had sent him kind of on a wild goose chase, all the way to Indiana. I think it was Dyer that he was going to when he found out that it wasn't an actual job, and he was kind of ticked off already, kind of angry, felt like he was being lied to, and then he's out partying, and then ends up with that little 22 gun and a knife, and I think it was just it all came to a head at that point. Now the thing that I've always wondered, how did he pick that particular location? Did he case the place and see women going in and out? I haven't read anything that actually said why he chose that location, and only one of the women I think was raped at the 8. So it's almost like it was an afterthought, because it was the last one killed, I think, was the one that was actually raped, and she was supposedly the better, the best looking, very subjective, and it was the last one killed. So it's almost like he was, I could buy the fact that he might have been in some sort of drug-induced alcoholic stupor when it started, and he was somewhat aware of what he was doing, but maybe not completely. But by the time the rape came around, I'm thinking he was starting to come out of it a little bit. But who knows? I mean, the guy was sick. He was just sick. I mean, definitely sick.
Yeah, it's interesting you use that word, because we've talked in the past about what's criminally insane, what's not, what's insane.
Mm-hmm.
See, like he's insane by our definition, but criminally he wasn't insane, was he? Because he tried to cover up what he had done.
Not at all. Well, initially he said he didn't remember it and all this other stuff. So, I'm not sure how they got out of that. I mean, he was evaluated by a team of 6 psychiatrists. Well, I should say, I think there was a team of 7. I think it was 3 psychiatrists from the defense, 3 from the prosecution, and then one other person. It was a general doctor, not a psychiatrist. So, and of course, they came to the conclusion. All of them came to the conclusion that he was fit for trial. He knew what he was doing was wrong. But again, at the time, he kept denying that he didn't remember what had happened. So that doesn't necessarily mean you're insane, but it's also hard to prove intent if you're saying you don't remember any of it. But then, he started. There were details that he would remember, and then they were like, "Wait a minute, I thought you didn't remember that." So part of it was a lie, and part of it might be the sociopathic tendencies that, people who are sociopathic can lie, and you'd never know the difference, even on a polygraph. So it's kind of hard to say.
Yeah, it's interesting because I'm always curious. I mean, okay, so you talked about it earlier, whether he cased the joint out where the nurses were.
Mm-hmm.
That's one thing. And then the other thing was, I'm curious if the plan, when he went in there, did he know he was going to kill them, or did he plan to rob them? Did he plan to rape them? What was the plan?
Well, his explanation, and again, you got to take it with a grain of salt, because really he's the only one that knows what was going through his mind. But he said that he originally, it was just he had planned on doing a burglary. Initially, it was just going to be a simple burglary. He wanted the money. He was just going to force his way in and grab some money. So at some point, things went bad. I think even the psychologist, or one of the psychiatrists in jail, had asked him, what made you so angry? What did they assumed that maybe one of the women had done something to kind of set him off, to change it from a burglary into like a mass murder. And again, he kind of stuck with no, they didn't really do anything. It just wasn't their night, So who knows? We'll never know.
It's funny because actually one of them did set him off, but I'm pretty sure this was after he was already kind of.
No, he was already that set that that's what he was going to do, and I'm sure. I just can't imagine being that one Filipino nurse, Cora, that.
Cora Amaral, the one that's
during this whole thing. Yeah, the one hiding in the bed the whole time. I just can't. I mean, the sheer terror that was going through her mind, and
something else, the fact that she got up across the courtroom, stood in front of his table, stuck her finger damn near right into his face, and said he's the one that did it. Most people wouldn't even. They point from across the room. She wasn't.
No, she was. Yeah, she was pissed. Yeah, she was pissed, and rightfully so. But yeah, that was awesome. That was one of the best. I wish I would have been in the courtroom to see that. Just point right in his face. And he was a mean SOB. And again, I think he was sociopathic, so there's no empathy whatsoever. So to him, who cares? Even with his own life, he didn't really care much. He's like, so they're going to burn me, so I'm going to die. Well, if I did that, then I deserve to die. You know, so it's it. So I think he